The title of the work is Words That Are Lasting, and that's sort of a play on what is said to sort of seal the belts, is that these words will last as long as the waters flow, as long as the grasses will grow, and as long as the sun will shine. And that is hopefully what will be the case here. I think it's a fantastic context for it within the law building. Indigenous students will be able to, I hope, recognize something of themselves in it, and non-Indigenous students will be able to look and learn about these ideas, these cultures, and this worldview, which is really the important part of what I hope to convey with this. These belts are something that historically have been used to remember the oral agreements that are nation to nation, or to do with Haudenosaunee governance. And basically it's like the legal document. I mean, there's even, I think the Dish with One Spoon is a belt that I've represented here that was actually used to defend land usage rights in Ontario in a court case. So that made perfect sense to me, that this is what I wanted to do. It's something, wampum belts appear in my work conceptually. I draw on them in my installation work as an artist, but this is the first time I've really represented physically what they are. So yeah, that was my starting point. I just kind of immediately saw what I wanted this to be. The space itself here really lends itself to something like this. The height is fantastic. It gets a lot of light, so I chose materials that can play with the light somewhat. I think I was working with historical belts, but I'm really interested in the symbolic representations. I didn't really want to have post-contact belts. There's more sort of literal representation with sort of figures and houses often. I wanted to have the symbols, so it was sort of more of the pre-contact. The belts that are represented, there are 7. There's the 2-row, the Council Fire or Joseph Brant belt, I've seen it called the 2 things. There's the Anishinaabe Friendship belt. There's the Dish and One Spoon. There's the Ever-Growing Tree, or it's called the Everlasting Tree. And there's Old Fort. And I invented one, it's called 3 Nations. So the story behind that is, in choosing the belts, I wanted to first have a selection of Haudenosaunee and some Algonquin belts to try and represent the different peoples of this territory. But I wasn't able to contact or reach out the holders of the belt for the Algonquin belts. I'm Mohawk and English heritage, so I felt like the other belts, I know those belts, they're something that I could work with, and I did try and reach out to talk to different people to make sure that to represent them would be okay. I worked a lot with Jan Hill, who's the director of the Indigenous initiatives here at Queen's, and spoke with other people along the way. Alan Corbière is another person who was great and agreed to be a consultant. He's an Anishinaabe wampum belt, very knowledgeable historian. So I ended up not being able to contact the person for those Algonquin belts, couldn't get a response, so I switched them out and put in the Everlasting Tree and the invented one because I felt like there should be a belt that existed for this space with the nations that are acknowledged as the Mississauga, the Algonquin, or Anishinaabe, and the Mohawk for this territory. So it's the blue one with the 3 Council Fire diamonds that's in it. I made it blue because it is invented. It's not one of the real ones, but the blues to represent the Bay of Quinte and the sky. Otherwise, the purple and white of the work is like what wampum belts would usually be. Wampum belts are made from shells that come from the bottom of the ocean. And they're beads. Usually they're beaded and woven. And so they use purple and white beads that come from these shells. And the different symbols in them, everything has a meaning. The thickness of the lines in the 2-row versus the Ojibwe Friendship belt. The thicker the line, the stronger the relationship, the stronger the path between the two nations. The two-row has two purple rows, but it also has a background, a white background, but the white background is actually three white rows if you look at it in that way. And those three white rows are actually even more important than the two purple rows, because those are what's holding those two purple rows intact. If you didn't have those white rows, they would collapse and fall apart. So it's the strength of what's in people's hearts, minds, and relationships that keeps those two rows parallel. So that's part of the concept. The other thing with what I did in the work is I have them hanging from cables. Now, obviously they have to hang from cables, but I really wanted to have the cables be a part of the work so that conceptually they represent those ends on wampum belts. Like I said, they're sort of woven, these woven structures. And usually the ends are hanging long off of the structures. And it's not just because they forgot to cut them off or anything. It's really to represent the idea of these words will last. So the work is made of acrylic panels. And I think really the process, in part the acrylic is nice because it's lightweight. It doesn't have the same weight that glass would. And I've been doing some projects recently using acrylic and laser cutting. So because the wampum belt shapes are so sort of geometric and symmetrical, this seemed like a very nice way to be able to use the laser cutting technology. It's very clean. And yeah, the belts themselves are actually, it looks like one piece, but it's actually three pieces put together. It's like three layers. There's sort of a front, a back, and a middle. And this was really to be able, just design-wise, it's what the team that I was working with on the laser cutting end of things suggested, proposed, and I think it works well. It's got one solid piece of clear acrylic going in the middle, and then the colored designs on either side. They're stuck to that central piece by laminated UV protected film that's like a double-sided tape, an industrial strength double-sided tape basically. And so it was kind of like putting puzzles together in the studio where we just had to line them up and fit them down, and they got stuck on one by one. And you flip it over and you stick down the other side and just have to work it out so that you align things properly. We had our sort of system with like hinging tape and making sure that everything stayed in place. The first one was a little nerve-wracking, but then you figure out a system on how to make it work. And I think in the end, I know where there's a few little imperfections, but overall I think it works well. There are also these sort of screws that are strategically placed at different points where the joins happen. And that was just more of a security thing to make doubly sure that the pieces would stay intact. But visually, I'm happy. I was a little worried that they would be too dominant, but I think that they end up fitting in just fine. So, yeah, I think something also that is nice about the space is that it's not just a suspended piece up in the air. Because of the stairs that are such a major architectural component of this space, I think it really works well with them, just for people being able to walk up the stairs and see the work at different angles. You get a whole different kind of relationship with it, appreciation of it, than if you were just down below. So I'm happy with that aspect too.